Welcome, everyone. It is Danny Haiphong joining you today at this 9 a.m. Eastern Time to discuss a very important topic, a very important subject, one that honestly I wish I could avoid because uh, I don't know if I just came on live on YouTube. There might be a lag. So let me just begin again. Welcome, everyone. This is Danny Haiphong, host of the Left Lens and of the upcoming show, The Internationalist Transmission, which will begin later this month, I believe, probably next month, to be more honest. And the reason for that is because I am no longer going to be working full time. This has been quite a journey over the last several months, the last year and a half for all of us, and I need a break from that grind. And I'm actually being allowed the opportunity to do so. So I feel very lucky, but I will be relying more on my followers, my contributors, my readers, my comrades, those who follow my work and appreciate my work. And so I have been over the course of the last, I would say, a month or so, asking those who do follow my work and support it to please subscribe to my Patreon, become a sustainer for no matter how small of an amount, and help make this transition actually sustainable so I can do this for as long as possible and put in the time that I know this kind of work deserves and that I have rarely had the ability to achieve in the past and to put in the past. So, welcome everyone again. Good morning. Good morning. It is early for me. I have the day off. I'm fulfilling a 30-day notice right now, but soon I will have a lot more time to be with you all at hours that are a lot more convenient. I hope for viewers, for readers, for those who follow me. Again, please do support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Danny Haiphong, as I'm moving into a transition where I will be relying more on my readers, my followers, and those who appreciate my work for the support in order to make this transition to a more full-time capacity in this work more possible. So thank you for all those who already do contribute. I also, later in this stream, I also will announce, probably at the end, after we have our great guest on talking about lab leak theory, there is a great event that I will be speaking at, and I will be co-organizing, which is held by the Friends of Socialist China, a platform that myself and a comrade and two other comrades have formed. And it's a platform to express solidarity, to understand China better, to understand its process better. And we are going to have a great lineup at this event, which is called the Propaganda War Against China. It'll start 9 a.m. Eastern on a Saturday. Yes, that's probably very early for a lot of you, but it'll be very much worth it. So I'm going to share details about that. Um, Actually, I want to pull it up. So give me just 1 second, okay? I'm going to pull this event up by going into my Twitter and getting it up on the page. Let me see if I can. Here we go. Okay. Yep. So I'm going to pull that up later before the stream ends. But, it's early, so I don't know how many folks are coming on. I tried to share this out. It's streaming on Facebook. I don't know why it's not streaming on, I think it's streaming on Twitter as well. For those of you who may see this on social media, Facebook, Twitter, please do go to the Left Lens, give a like, go to the YouTube page and watch it there. In any event, yes, everyone like and share. So, hi, it may take some time for people to come in, so that's why I'm on a half hour early, so as many people can hear what my guest Joshua Cho, an independent journalist, has to say about lab leak theory. And so I'm just going to give my position on this because unfortunately, it is a very important issue, and a lot of people across the political spectrum have embraced this, what really is a conspiracy, right? And I've in the past compared it to Russiagate, and people have taken issue with that. But I do stand firm in my position on this, in that while Russiagate had many more electoral implications directly when it came to the 2016 election, and then all of the fallout from that, it is clear that lab leak theory is politically motivated and driven by intelligence agencies. Let's be very clear about this, that from the very beginning, right, back in 2020, when we had people like Josh Rogan over at the Washington Post saying that he had anonymous sources and so-called leaked cables saying that there were so-called safety issues at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Just understand that those sources were intelligence sources, and that even the documents that he read from did not have any issues with what the Wuhan Institute of Virology was doing in their lab. The issue was supposedly about understaffing, which is already a dubious claim. And I know our guest, Joshua Cho, will have a lot to say about, because he wrote a whole article about the so-called safety concerns at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And now there's been all this stuff that's come out about gain of function research, which he will also get into. So I'm not a scientist, and I don't like to play scientist, because COVID-19 origins, and I don't want to get canceled here on YouTube, because I know a lot of people are getting taken down. I know things, topics about this are being heavily monitored on platforms. So I want to be very clear. I'm not playing scientist here. I have no intention of doing that. But there is a huge political motive behind this lab leak theory, and it has everything to do with the United States' aggressive and downright racist new Cold War posture. China is being blamed for starting the COVID-19 pandemic, or if it isn't the more far right iteration of the Chinese Communist Party, the big bad Chinese Communist Party, released a virus into the world population, as a way to whatever secure power, all of this nonsense. Then what is more mainstreamed is the notion that China covered up an accident, something that happened at the Wuhan Institute of Virology that allowed this virus to escape. But the facts are very clear. The Wuhan Institute of Virology has no capacity to study, had no possession of this kind of virus. There are so many things that Joshua will get into about the way that research is conducted at WIV and similar institutions, and how the closest virus to the COVID-19 pandemic, to SARS-CoV-2, is so many generations far from it, that there's just no way that anything like COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 could have been produced in a lab. And this has been verified by the World Health Organization. Nobody wants to take the WHO's investigation, where the results were released in March, seriously. But not only did they verify that China did everything in their capacity to cooperate with them, but it also concluded, as of March 31st, that the most likely origin of COVID-19 is zoonotic, aka came from nature and jumped from nature to human beings, jumped from animal to human beings, not from a lab. Now, it is important to understand that there has been a lot of pushback recently, and we have to get into the politics of this. The Biden administration has changed the political calculus. Now, the World Health Organization has done a 180 of sorts and has adhered to pressure from the Biden administration to try to demand that China open up the WIV and investigate. And China has been opposed to this. And there have been a lot of people now saying, oh no, China's opposed to this. Look, they're not cooperating with the World Health Organization. Told you so. We have to pump the brakes, because the reason why China is not allowing this lab leak investigation to go on is because of the political motivation of all of this. If you have the World Health Organization already releasing a report saying it's more likely a zoonotic origin that the virus contains, then why would China allow this lab leak theory, which is all about smearing China, to have any basis for investigation? Can China truly trust any institution that is being influenced by the United States in being honest about its investigation? And can and first, and we have to be very clear as well that the this whole lab leak theory is really about undermining China. It's about China's sovereignty. It's about demonizing China, blaming China, scapegoating China. And the fact that the World Health Organization has been pressured into something that is very much a U.S. project, a project of the United States to undermine another country, just goes to show that when politics shift in the United States, it has worldwide implications. So, uh, you know, there are a lot of questions about lab leak theory, and Joshua Cho is going to get into some of the nuts and bolts. But I am going to just, until he comes on, I'm going to talk about some of the political problems with lab leak theory. And another article that's great that I'll try to link to in the description after this was written by Alex Rubinstein back in the summer of this year, where he talks about a lot of these political problems, right? And one of the biggest problems with lab leak theory is that it only goes after the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So if we're going to be consistent and we're going to say, okay, we want to have a total investigation of everything that could be possible, even though scientists, the vast majority of scientists, don't give me Nicholas Wade that, he's been completely uh you know rejected in the larger scientific community everywhere, and this includes China, but this includes the scientific community everywhere. No one is holding up Nicholas Wade other than lab leak enthusiasts saying he is the one we should be listening to. So let's also be clear on that. And I know Joshua Cho has a lot of feelings on Nicholas Wade. As an astute person, hey Tony said in the chat, yes, open up Fort Detrick. That is the point of the politicization of this. That if we're going to be consistent, and I would never advocate for these labs to be investigated for COVID-19 because it's likely zoonotic in origin. So it would be a lot of wasted time, especially for international bodies, which are already inadequate, which already don't do enough, and which already are so heavily influenced by imperialism. Don't think we could trust any investigation led by these institutions. So, and it falls outside of the scope of institutions that are less influenced, like, the Office for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. We saw what happened there with Syria, that there was a lot of flip-flopping, a lot of pressure. So the international situation really demands that we move away from this lab leak theory. This is what this whole conversation will be about, because by focusing solely on Wuhan Institute of Virology, there's already an ideological message being sent. And we have to focus on ideology as we do not have a lot of facts that still need to be unearthed about COVID-19. But the ideological significance of lab leak theory is that it focuses on the Wuhan Institute of Virology and sends the message. Wuhan is where the COVID-19 pandemic started. Wuhan is where it emerged from, and China is the reason for that. The sick man of Asia racist trope continues, right? And I know about this because I grew up in an environment where, the notion of Asians, anyone who looks Chinese or Asian identified, there's the sick man of Asia trope that, you're more likely to get sick, that you are a carrier of disease. That is something that is very common in the United States and the Western world. It is a very much a part of their white supremacist infrastructure and ideological infrastructure. So that is what lab leak theory really reinforces, because it has no basis in science. And honestly, when China says this virus is being politicized, they're talking about how lab leak theory demonizes China, undermines China, attempts to violate Chinese sovereignty, attempts to dehumanize the Chinese people. And this whole association with COVID-19 with Chinese people has had intense and immense impacts and effects here in the United States, as we've seen with all of the anti-Asian racism and violence that has spiked since COVID-19 began. So that, I think, forms some of the political basis of COVID-19 lab leak theory. There are so many issues with it and Josh is going to get into. So he wrote 2 great pieces for MintPress News, which we will talk about. And he's going to get into a lot of the nuts and bolts, some of them at least scientifically, because and I really applaud him for this. He worked with virologists, scientists, and he talked to them about the bases for some of these claims, about safety standards, for example, at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Um, bio level safety, all of that has been, at the basis of lab leak theory. And it's really dependent on people not really knowing much about science, because the vast majority of us aren't scientists. And so it's very easy to get caught up in anything that's an anti-establishment or poses as an anti-establishment theory. That, yeah, there's this government in China that is working behind the scenes to create a virus, or maybe it's doing things so carelessly because there's this nefarious research going on. And Joshua Cho will debunk all of that. So welcome everyone. We've gotten more people come in to this live stream. As I said before, Joshua Cho, an independent journalist, he will join me at 9:30 to talk about his 2 pieces on MintPress News. That's the basis for this live stream. And I want to also just let you know that, later this month, I'm going to be taking a major break from full-time work. I mean, I need the break, so to speak, but I'm using it as an opportunity to really do this work on a more full-time basis. So I'm asking readers, followers, those who appreciate my work to help me by becoming a sustaining subscriber to my Patreon for whatever amount, however small, whatever amount helps. And I'm really excited about this because I'm going to be doing more things like this. I'm going to be doing a new program, the Internationalist Transmission, which kicked off a little bit last year, but a little bit last year, a little bit during the winter time. But it wasn't able to be sustained because I just don't have the time as work started to kick up and reopening talks at my job. And there was a lot of fight about that. I was involved in some union activity. So in any event, now I'm going to be getting a lot more time coming up, but I'll need your support. And so I am asking for it. Anyway, it's early, so a lot of people might not be able to catch this, but please do like, subscribe, share. And yeah, we're talking lab leak theory. And for me, I've been very disappointed. I haven't really wanted to talk. I don't even like talking about COVID-19 anymore, because I think COVID-19 has taken people down, a lot of people down, a very dangerous direction. There's all of this, there's all this misinformation. What China warned about back before the United States even had an outbreak that was detected, right? And there's a lot of evidence that shows that COVID-19 was spreading in the United States in December, or maybe even as early as September, in Italy as early as September of 2019. We can go down on Brazil, Spain. There have been traces found in water sewage. from prior to to all of the outbreaks that occurred, the first outbreak that occurred in Wuhan. There's a lot of evidence that shows that COVID-19 didn't start in Wuhan, and that's another major problem with lab leak theory, is that it does solely focus on China, and it is all about how bad and how poor China has done, when in fact China has the best COVID-19 response in the world, and in a lot of ways, right? Vietnam is a close second. New Zealand has done some good things, but China was the first country to detect the virus, to understand it, to begin the process of figuring out how to respond to it. And they did a masterful job and are still doing a masterful job in protecting human life. China is a country of 1.4 billion people, and there are less than 6,000 COVID-19 deaths. The United States has more than 100 times that number, but less than a fourth of the population. So lab leak theory really does distract from those facts. And it's unfortunate because China early on in the pandemic, before it was even a pandemic, was warning about, or after it was declared a pandemic early in 2020, once it started spreading around the world, they warned about the infodemic. And the United States has been awash in infodemic. There are so many ideas, so many people playing scientists, so much mistrust in the government, rightfully so. The United States government is not to be trusted. The United States government has conducted biological warfare on its own people many, 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 many times, right? The United States has used biological warfare abroad many times. They talk about Syria using chemical weapons with absolutely no proof. And actually, that's been debunked so many times by great journalists. But at the same time, the United States uses biological chemical weapons like depleted uranium, like white phosphorus, right? So the hypocrisy is so clear here that the infodemic has produced a situation where China is being blamed for COVID-19, whether accidentally or nefariously and intentionally, and the United States gets a pass, right? And so, you know, China and other forces, countries, progressives, leftists have said, yeah, open up Fort Detrick then. Let's talk about why it was closed for safety issues in 2019. Let's talk about how people have been infected. I think it was July of 2019. That's why it was closed. There was some kind of virus spreading, right, in the area. And let's talk about all of the terrible things that have gone down at Fort Detrick, like, for example, experimenting with anthrax. Let's talk about all of that, maybe. But if we can't talk about it, then we need to stop talking about the Wuhan Institute of Virology, because there's so much evidence that shows that the Wuhan Institute of Virology is doing research that is pretty standard on coronaviruses and other viruses, and that it's the lack of understanding and the misinformation that's swirling about that gets us thinking that, oh man, this dealing with coronaviruses at all is a danger to everybody, and that's not true. That's not science, right? Coronaviruses and all kinds of viruses. There's all kinds of experiments done on mice and on other, and in a lot of ways that are needed to understand this biological phenomenon. And so we have to be very careful in conflating some kind of anti-establishment attitudes with conspiratorial thinking. And I know a lot of people are going to get mad at me for saying conspiratorial thinking, but guess what? When the establishment is pumping something like lab leak theory, and it's coming from US intelligence, and it's coming from people like Michael Gordon, who co-authored with Judith Miller the WMD's article in the New York Times, which was so influential in facilitating the U.S. invasion of Iraq, then best believe I'm going to use the word conspiratorial to talk about something like lab leak theory, which comes out of the establishment. So I don't want anyone coming after me and saying, oh, you're lambasting those who are critical of the government, etc. No, that's not what I'm doing. I'm actually saying that lab leak theory is an establishment conspiracy theory, and there are a lot of those. WMDs, Russiagate, virtually anything that is said about countries that the United States doesn't like. Havana syndrome, right? I mean, all of these are conspiracy theories that help not only explain away the injustices and the destructive war crimes of United States imperialism, but they also create the justification for war. And so I am always going to call theories like lab leak theory conspiracy theory, because they lead exactly to that. They lead to a scenario where there is a major confrontation between imperialist powers in China. And I'm not interested in that. And so, I see a lot of people coming in, and I want to, just remind that Joshua Cho is coming on in about a couple minutes. I'm just waiting for him to come on. We're going to have a conversation for about 45 minutes or so on his 2 articles. I'll pull them up on the screen when he comes. And yeah, I'm about to do this more on a full-time basis. And it's a very exciting time for me. I'll be making a new welcome video for my Patreon. I'll be announcing international transmission, trying to work with more folks globally here in the United States and the West, trying to develop an anti-imperialist, socialist-oriented independent media, which can be an intervention into this independent media space, which is honestly, I think, a little bit sorry about that, a little bit confused now because well, let's be honest, with the whole Bernie Sanders and AOC and the squad and all of these forces on the so-called progressive left flailing about, a lot of those who put a lot of time and investment into those forces, into the so-called social democratic left-ish wing of the Democratic Party, I noticed that there is a lot of confusion and where do we go, and a lot of opportunities for both moving things forward in the independent media space, but also a lot of challenges in the sense that look at where we are right now. We're here talking about lab leak theory, and a lot of people who call themselves progressives have covered lab leak theory in not such a good manner. They've covered it in a manner that actually just reinforces this narrative that the Wall Street Journal, Michael R. Gordon are credible sources, right? And that's a huge mistake and an immense mistake. And so I'm here to try to offer an alternative voice and to work with others to help make that happen, because anti-imperialism really is the central question of our generation. So please do support me. You can do that. Of course, like this video, share this video, subscribe to the Left Lens, subscribe, and like, especially. And also, if you can sustain me on Patreon, patreon.com/Danny Haiphong, that would be incredible, because I am going to be doing this on a more full-time basis, and mainstream media is not hiring me, guys, just to let you know. So I can stop rambling about lab leak theory now, about the politics of it, because our guest is actually here. And he said he was having some connection issues. So if we have to work through that, apologies. We'll do the best that we can. But he is here now, and I'm going to put him on. Hey, Josh, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks to be here.
Hey, good to be with you. So again, Joshua, do you like Josh better?
Yeah, I like Josh better, but it's okay if you call me Joshua. It's not a big deal.
All right. Well, Mr. Cho, you wrote 2 incredible articles on MintPress News. You've been a journalist for a while. Do you want to just talk about who you are and maybe a little bit about what got you into writing about lab leak theory, which is something that I think has caused immense confusion among both the general population, which most people subscribe to it in the United States in particular, but especially our friends in the progressive and left movement. So could you talk about what got you interested in talking about this?
Yeah, so I've been writing about media criticism for about since 2019, but I think I mainly started writing about China in 2020 because of the pandemic. I've actually been meaning to write about the subject earlier just because it's an interesting subject, but I think I there was no real stressing need for me at the time before the pandemic to write about it, but now that I did, that's when the whole thing started. But at first I didn't really take the lab leak theory too seriously because I know that it was spreading around early 2020. Because like in literally every pandemic or epidemic situation, there's always going to be like a few conspiracy theorists. That's just what people who have followed these things for a while have noted. Like it just happens in every single epidemic. It doesn't matter how realistic it is. There's always people who think that. But I think just because I find it silly doesn't mean that like it's not worth talking about. Because if enough people believe it, then you have to address it, even if you think it's a little beneath you at times. But so yeah,
Mm.
like I felt like there were many claims being spread around. Like that would just I was just kind of flabbergasted because like people just accepted them at face value without doing any like fact checking. And I wasn't aware of anyone else doing it. And I'm not really a science journalist. This was literally my first attempt at doing anything like science journalism. But
I I gotta really applaud you for that because when I was reading it, there's some things I had to read over again because there's just a lot about the science of this issue, which understandably is just difficult to
too technical.
comprehend.
Yeah.
Yes, it's too technical and it lends itself for I think the vulnerability of being taken by a narrative that is not technical at all. It is entirely political, which we'll get into
Hmm.
in the lab leak theory. And for them to be pulled into this, especially I was talking earlier about the infodemic, right? Like there's been an infodemic
Yep.
in the United States and the West where we do not get good information about COVID-19. We don't have a public health infrastructure which is allowing for that. So I want to transition and let's talk about your first article of this two-part series that you wrote. I don't know if you have any more. I don't think you have any more parts, right?
No,
Coming
no,
out,
no.
but
Those two are the
because
main claims. So I felt like I should address those two in particular, and I did it
right.
with many thousands of words. I didn't really want to do that, but that's kind of what it takes to sufficiently debunk these things.
Yeah, totally. So, I don't want you to go word for word because you said
Yeah.
a lot, but the first article here, right? How the US media misrepresents the Wuhan Institute of Virology's laboratory and safety protocols. So, I just want you to review for us, and this was published September 15th, so recently. I want you to review for viewers what what argument were you making? What evidence behind some of the evidence behind it, and what were you trying to address here?
So the first article was dedicated specifically to the claim that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was operating under subpar safety standards, and the main popular argument among lab leak theorists for this claim is that if Chinese scientists were lying about not having SARS-CoV-2, and that's a very big if. There's actually no evidence for it, but if they were lying, they were more prone to have a lab accident just because their safety standards were so poor. So that was the main claim that I wanted to address. And the argument was that some um, there's so many different arguments. They're not even contradictory or coherent. But like the first one was that like the Wuhan Institute of Virology has a BSL-4 lab, and that's inherently suspicious, and that's evidence of China's alleged biowarfare program. And the second argument was that um, China was doing bat virus experiments at the BSL-2 BSL-2, or BSL-2 is short for biosafety level 2, and that's considered subpar or um, insufficient for some experiments, which is somewhat debatable. We can get into that later, but the argument was that since they were doing it there, like a virus could have escaped from BSL-2, and um, yeah, so that those were the arguments that I wanted to address. Do you want me to address like the counterpoints I made?
Yeah, sure. Please get into what makes all of this a bit nonsensical to be I guess to to kind of understate it.
Okay, well, the first argument that a BSL-4 lab is just inherently suspicious is, I think Sam Husseini was the one who was one of the first people who talked about that. Like he was like he asked like some U.S. government official like, oh, like is it just a coincidence that it showed up in the near where Wuhan has its BSL-4 laboratory, and like because that's where you handle like the most dangerous viruses like Ebola and smallpox. And he thought that like because researchers researched those kinds of viruses in BSL-4, it therefore could have escaped from BSL-4. And other people cite that argument, but the reason why that's silly is because I don't think this is his only source, but one of Sam Husseini's main sources in that article was Francis Boyle. I don't know if listeners know who that is, but he wrote the main biowarfare law in 1989 for the U.S. He's a lawyer. He's not a virologist. He's not a biologist. He has no science background, but he wrote the relevant law, and that's kind of why Husseini thinks we should take him seriously. But if you look into Francis Boyle, you'll realize that like he's literally like not fully here. Like he says things that like something about like the virus SARS-CoV-2 being taken from Canada or Saudi Arabia or something like that, and then like it was stolen, and then he said that the WHO was in on it, and like Husseini said that like it was unfair. It kind of implied that like it was unfair for the media to blackball him and just ignore him because he's a conspiracy theorist, but like that's literally what he is. Like any sane person would just ignore Francis Boyle because he has no science background. He's just spouting like ridiculous origin scenarios. Like, come on, man. Canada and Saudi Arabia stole coronavirus and then somehow it got to China. Like, come on, dude. But and the WHO was in on it. You think they? I don't know. That's just so absurd. But anyway. But the main argument I want to note is that uh, coronavirus researchers around the world don't study coronavirus at BSL-4. So like, and Xizeng Li herself and people at the Wuhan Institute of Virology have stated that they do coronavirus research at BSL-2 and 3, which is exactly the standard everywhere else across the world. So even if the Wuhan Institute of Virology's um, BSL-4 facility was doing biowarfare research, it just has no relevance to the COVID-19 pandemic because researchers don't study that there. That's kind of a lot
Yeah.
to take in. Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, no, we can let's yeah, let's let me ask you about this because you did write this, I think, in this piece. I don't know if it was in the second or the first piece, but you talk about and you talk to virologists, scientists about this misunderstanding that studying coronaviruses in a lab like WIV could necessarily mean that they were studying SARS-CoV-2. Could you talk about how you did outline this in your pieces, how that's just not true, how that's literally just speculation, which is what lab leak theory is 100% entirely. It's all just speculation. But could you talk about that in particular, this idea that studying coronaviruses is in and of itself dangerous?
Oh, like no, like people study coronaviruses around the world. Like, what are people talking about? And of course, it's natural for the one because SARS-CoV-1 literally China. Like, what would you want them to do? Like, you want America to do it, or some place that didn't have the outbreak do it? Like, people, scientists study the viruses that occur in nature, that occur naturally around them. It makes perfect sense to specialize in the viruses that occur near to you to do that. But for but
Uh, we're
reporting from
having
the Interceptors
sorry,
Navy log
Josh.
is like,
We're having some connection issues. Sorry, Josh. How are you doing? Hold on. Let's just stop you for a second. All right. Speak now. Let me see you. Just if you could just talk, just say anything, because I heard your mic was cutting out and freezing a bit.
oh, okay, I'm sorry about that. Is it better now?
I think so. I think so. Yeah. Sorry. Could you restate that? I don't know if it's because sometimes. Are you just using your computer?
Yeah, I'm just using my computer. I don't really do too much of these interviews.
Yeah. Well, there might be a way. I don't know how it works on StreamYard. If you go to your cam mic section and you go to the audio, do you see where that is? You want to unclick automatically adjust the mic volume, and that might help.
Where do I
If that's
click
it.
that? Is
There's a
that the top of my
little.
Mac?
Mm, No, it should be in the StreamYard where you see like on the StreamYard page. If you go to Cam Mic, that little
Yes.
tool, yeah, hit that, hit audio, and then
Okay.
um and then
I
hit
clicked. I unchecked that box. Is it better now?
hopefully it will be better. But yes, continue. Sorry everybody about that. I mean, this stuff happens, so no worries.
Where did I get cut off?
I think you got caught off almost immediately after you talked about you were talking about how coronavirus, how it makes a lot of sense for China, especially in Wuhan, this international hub, to study coronaviruses because of the SARS experience. And then I think you started to get cut off after that.
Okay. Well, I remember. I think I remember laughing at the Intercept's latest reporting throughout September. They supposedly found these FOIA documents that supposedly show that they were doing dangerous research. But like if you look at what virologists who have been studying coronaviruses actually said, or their interpretation of the documents, like for example Dr. Stephen Goldstein, who was one of the scientists I interviewed for my articles, he stated that the Intercept documents are actually evidence against the lab leak because it confirmed what the EcoHealth Alliance and what the Wuhan Institute of Virology were saying all along, that they were only studying SARS-1 like coronaviruses. They were not studying viruses related to SARS-CoV-2 because there was no real reason to, because there was no pandemic before then. So why would they study that? Like that's just like common sense. Like come on. But but then these scientists not but these journalists they find these documents, they want people to read them. They want to make people think it's like a really sexy read, and like they have to spice it up a little bit. So like they just try to like use a lot of innuendo to make it seem as if these documents told us new information. But another scientist I talked to, microbiologist Stanley Perlman, he told me that the Intercept's reporting contained basically no new information. But like, how many people in the general readership would know something like that? You would have to be following this debate for a long time to like recognize that like these documents don't actually tell you anything new. In fact, they actually confirmed that the EcoHealth Alliance and Chinese scientists were telling the truth, that they were only studying SARS-1 like viruses. But like, I want to make another point though. Like, if FOIA documents and leaked documents like that EcoHealth Alliance DARPA proposal, if leaked and FOIA documents confirm that they've only been studying COVID-1, and these proposals from like what, like 2018, 2019, do you think people are going to find new evidence that they were studying SARS-CoV-2? Probably not. Like, you're probably not going to find anything new. And um, yeah, sorry, I might
Yeah.
have gotten a little lost over there.
No. It's fine. It's fine. You got into some things in your second article, but yeah. Let's rewind a bit back to your first article because I want you to talk about the sources for lab leak theory that you were responding to, in particular Josh Rogan, but others who have made this claim. You mentioned Sam Husseini. Talk about, maybe if you could talk about the contrast between the sources that you use and the sources that those who have championed this lab leak theory are using, because I think it's important to differentiate between the two.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. Like there, I wrote so many thousands of words. It's hard to remember everything that I wrote, even for
No,
my two
that's
most
fine.
recent
You don't have
articles.
to. Just so
Yeah.
please, anything, any summary that you can give is great.
So Josh Rogan, like the originator of these unsafe lab leak conditions, actually started from Josh Rogan in April 2020, and he used the State Department cable that he had. He literally cited two paragraphs that did not say what he said it. He claimed it said. They were just talking about like how Wuhan Institute of Virology staff wanted more experienced staff that could handle viruses safely. That they did not say that like they were doing dangerous experiments in unsafe conditions. They did not say it. Okay, like the grant proposal actually, like the State Department cable that he cited actually stated that they need more money, and that the U.S. government should give them more money, which actually wasn't given. But the point was not that they were doing unsafe experiments, because if the U.S. diplomats who visited the Wuhan Institute of Virology, who wrote that cable, or was part of writing that cable actually thought that they were doing unsafe experiments, they would not ask for more money to give to them. They would ask for less money or not to give them any money. But like it's hard for non-scientists to interpret these kinds of documents. Like you need people who have expertise. And one, I think it's hard for people who are not on Twitter to understand this, but like one virologist, Dr. Angela Rasmussen, has like very excellent Twitter commentary. And she commented on this. She said, wait, this doesn't say what Josh Rogan says it does. Like it just means that they wanted more experienced staff, which is not a problem unique to China. It's a problem that happens all around the world, like in places outside China, like Australia, for example. Like every staff wants like more professional, more experienced staff to handle dangerous viruses. Um, but yeah, and like when the full cable was released, like it confirmed Dr. Rasmussen's skepticism about like Josh Rogan claiming what Josh Rogan claimed it meant. And it's what's funny is that like when Josh Rogan published that column, he was actually challenged on Twitter saying, "Hey, I don't believe your bullshit. This is not what it says." And he refused to release the cable to confirm. Like people were basically calling him out. They were saying like, "Oh, you're lying. This is not how you interpret it." And Josh Rogan had the opportunity to release the full cable to confirm what he was saying, but he refused to do that. So I kind of think he knew he was lying. But anyways, the full
Mm.
people.
Sorry, Josh, you're cutting in and out again.
Uh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Sorry.
Did I get cut off?
I don't know. Is everyone else? I'm just gonna check the chat. Is everyone else experiencing this issue? Um, okay, so you're back. You're not frozen anymore. So hopefully that means you won't get cut off again. But yeah, continue.
Where was I getting cut off? Where was I getting
You
cut
were
off?
getting um. Okay, so yes, people are experiencing the issue. Yeah, you were getting cut off. It was hard because it was at start from the beginning maybe because there was a lot of it was hard to get your point because it was cutting into like meaty parts. Um,
Oh, okay.
so yeah.
So
So maybe just re-begin again. That's fine.
okay. Sorry everyone. My laptop has
That's okay.
spotty issues sometimes. But anyways, so Josh Rogan, this whole unsafe laboratory claim started around April 2020 when Josh Rogan published an opinion column citing a redacted State Department cable. He only cited two paragraphs
Mm,
from it, but it didn't say what he claimed it said. He claimed it said that they were doing they were just there were in the Wuhan Institute of working in unsafe conditions, but what they were actually saying was that they wanted more experienced staff to handle dangerous viruses and that
right.
more money because if they were really doing it in safe ask for more money, they would ask to cut off money. That's the more logical conclusion. But Dr. Rasmussen, Angela Rasmussen on Twitter, basically stated that what I just said that they were just talking about the importance of their research and why they should get more money. And when the full State Department cable was released by the Post in July 2020, it basically confirmed what she was saying. And people at the time in April 2020, when the opinion column was first published, um, they were challenging Josh Rogan's interpretation of those cables or presentation of it. And Rogan had the opportunity to debunk them, but he didn't actually release the full cable when he had the opportunity to,
Mm.
which is a good sign he's lying. So the first part. But do you want to go? Do you want me to go into Nicholas Wade a little bit?
Yes, please, actually, because
Thank you.
he has been, as you know, he has been the foremost scientist that, or so-called scientist at this
He's not a
point,
scientist. He's a
who,
science writer.
yeah, science writer, who exactly, who's been legitimized, but who has legitimized this narrative, and people use him as an example of why this theory has credibility. So yes, please, Nicholas Wade, go.
Okay, so I think Nicholas Wade. I'll admit that if you don't have a science background, he might be convincing to people, or if you have not researched this topic carefully, he be convincing because he uses very technical sounding words and he says things very confidently. And I think people who mistake verbosity for accuracy uh, maybe a little duped, maybe a little fooled by him. But people should know that he's a discredited science writer, and I think over 100 scientists once wrote a letter denouncing him for misrepresenting their research because he wrote a race science book. I forgot the full claims. I haven't actually read the book because I think it would be wasting my time to do that. But I'm just letting you know that, like, I'm just letting people know that he has a history of misrepresenting a lot of scientists on this matter. But anyways, one of the claims he makes is that he actually cites Josh Rogan's column like a dupe. Like he just makes two completely contradictory arguments. First, he says because Josh Rogan's column was about the BSL-4 facility at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and he cites that the unsafe working conditions at BSL-4, which again have no relevance because they don't study coronavirus at BSL-4. Like he stated that like they were working in dangerous conditions in BSL-2, which and Nicholas Wade actually cites a scientist who is not a virologist or someone who's an expert on coronaviruses, Richard Ebright. He cites a ridiculous claim by him that like a BSL-2 level facility for studying coronaviruses is basically a dentist's office, which is just patently false. You can look up any YouTube video of a biosafety cabinet.
Oh no. Sorry, you're getting cut off at this part where you're talking about BSL, how BSL-2 is not a dentist office, and as Nicholas Wade claimed. No, I think we've lost you. Okay. Well, if you can hear me, Josh. Oh, sorry. If you can hear me, so people have been suggesting, and I've heard this suggested before, if you wanted to try to go audio only, I don't know if you're comfortable with that. That's something you could do as well to try to enhance the connection. Which just means you would go to that same tool and turn off your webcam. Where you were fixing the audio, there's a section in the settings, camera, and then you just would turn off your camera.
Turned off start cam, or do I turn? It doesn't show.
So there you go. You've turned it off now. So people, we'll have to do without your handsome face, but that's okay. Let's see how this works. Let's see how this works.
Is it better?
You're back. Your audio is back. So let's continue. You were just about to follow up on the right after you said it's patently false to make the claim that BSL-2 is equivalent to a dentist's office in terms of safety standards.
Oh, right. So anyways, you could just look up any YouTube video to confirm for yourself that that's not true. Dan, can you hear me now?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, okay. Your voice was actually cutting off for me.
Oh,
okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think you're back to normal now. But anyways, Nicholas Wade, he makes a contradictory argument about that, and he actually says BSL-2 is very unsafe. But he actually provides two sources in his own article that contradict what he says about BSL-2. That the Wuhan Institute of Virology's safety standards were subpar. He contradicts himself with two different sources. Like one was a Nature study whose main author was Christian Andersen, a influential study published in March 2020 that talked about how any lab leak scenario is basically implausible, and that there's no evidence that the SARS-CoV-2 engineered or in any way. And the second, and he actually stated that the reason the lab scenario should be studied or rejected is because coronavirus labs around the world were studying coronaviruses at BSL-2. And so that's one source there, but he doesn't really mention that even though he cites it. And the second source is a science interview with Xizeng Li. Dr. Xizeng Li, for people who don't know who she is, she's one of the she's basically the Wuhan Institute of Virology's most famous scientist, and she made really important scientific contributions like with SARS-CoV-1. He quotes the interview out of context. Like he just quotes Dr. Xizeng Li's and oh yeah, we do coronavirus research at BSL2 and BSL. But then when you read the actual interview, the interviewer takes it for granted that most coronavirus researchers do coronavirus research at BSL2 and 3, meaning there's nothing unusual about um, the Wuhan Institute of Virology doing that as well. But just to corroborate that even further, I actually asked other coronavirus researchers the same question, like Dr. Stanley Perlman and Dr. Stephen Goldstein, and they both confirmed that there's nothing unusual about them doing that. So there's nothing subpar about doing that.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Did you get all that?
Yeah. Yes, definitely did get all that. It's you're sounding good, so that's great, and you're making great points. So, let's talk about something that I think is very important that you discuss, because as much as we could dunk on Nicholas Wade, you make some really good points, and I'm going to share your second article on the screen here. And so I want to spend about 5 or 10 more minutes on some of these points that you made in your articles, and then we can finish up for about 10 minutes talking about what is the political significance of that, because I know there's a huge significance to doing this kind of work that you're doing. So hold on one second as I share the screen. Okay. So the smoking gun, Josh. Gain of function research. All right. This is being promoted everywhere from the left to the right as being the smoking gun for lab leak theory that scientists at WIV and related institutions, although
Can't hear you.
WIV is oh, sorry about that. Can everyone else hear me? Unfortunately, it may be your connection. I'm not getting anyone who's saying they can't hear me. Let me actually can you hear me now?
Yes.
There might be a lag. I can tell that there's a little bit of a lag between what I say and you hearing it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So sorry about that. So um yeah, the smoking gun, Josh. There are scientists at WIV who are enhancing coronavirus and leaving the world at risk of a pandemic. Talk about what you found out about gain of function research and why this is a ridiculous claim, as you argue in your article, about lab leak gain of function and the media myths swirling around the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Just talk about gain of function research, if you will, and why it's wrong to latch on to this and claim that this is proof that lab leak theory is at least credible enough to investigate.
Okay.
What is gain of
I spent
function
so much
research
time on
first?
this. Okay, so gain of function research, as currently defined by the US government, is research that is reasonably anticipated to enhance the virulence or transmissibility of viruses in humans. And it's very important to stress in humans. But let me explain what virulence and transmissibility is before for audiences who might not know. So virulence refers to the degree of disease caused by a virus. So, for example, just because you're infected by a virus doesn't mean you have a disease with any symptoms. So, for example, a COVID-19, you could be infected with SARS-CoV-2 and not have the disease COVID-19 because there are many asymptomatic cases of COVID-19. So, asymptomatic means you have no symptoms, and so virulence refers to the degree of disease caused by a virus. So, for example, a common cold is not very virulent, but Ebola is very virulent, where you might actually die if you get the disease. But transmissibility refers to how easily a virus spreads from person to person. So, for example, a low transmissibility virus might be like MERS, which has limited human to human transmission, which means that you primarily get it from animals, but you're not likely to start a pandemic because the virus doesn't spread very easily between people. But and infectivity, I should probably clarify what that means. Infectivity refers to a virus to enter a host cell and replicate inside. I'm probably messing that up a little bit because it is very technical, but let's just the important thing to stress is that infectivity and transmissibility are not the same thing. And what was it? Yeah, so gain of function research, to reiterate, is research that is reasonably anticipated to enhance the transmissibility or virulence of viruses in humans. That's how it's currently defined. But people may be confused about gain of function because there's many different definitions. And unfortunately, I remember one of my sources, Dr. Stanley Perlman, telling me that you could potentially get just based on who you ask, and that's why this is unnecessarily confusing, unfortunately. But the reason I use this definition is because this is how the U.S. government currently defines it, and the U.S. government currently defines it this way after years of deliberating on the risks or benefits of gain of function research. And it's a very broad term, and many things that gain of function are not really necessarily bad. And a lot of genetic modifications to viruses don't really pose any threat, um, or a lot of genetic modifications in general don't necessarily pose any threat, though some do, obviously. But the reason why, so some people have proposed changing the name gain of function because gain of function can range from very innocuous, like for example, if a virus becomes more virulent in mice but it becomes less virulent in humans, would that worry humans? No, it wouldn't. Like, because mice and humans are very different species. But that would still technically count as a gain of function among like the 2014 definition by the U.S. government, which defines it as reasonably anticipated enhanced virulence and transmissibility in mammals. And that's a very key difference because mammals is a much wider category than just humans. So yeah, so I mean, well, for example, like if you genetically modify something that would make it gain the function to attack cancer cells, would you be worried about that? No, you would want that to happen. Like that's a good thing. So just because it's something gains a function doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. But this is how it's currently defined by the U.S. government. I should probably stop talking before and let you can ask more precise questions.
Well, I think also what your analysis there also alludes to is the fact that there is it's and clarify if I'm wrong. Please correct me, Josh, if I'm wrong. But it is impossible to create a virus like SARS-CoV-2 using whatever level of research, whatever you want, gain of function, etc., to create SARS-CoV-2 from the coronaviruses and the various things that are being studied at WIV. That there's only one virus, and you mention it in your articles. If you could, it's like if you could clarify what that is.
RATG13.
RATG, that's the closest known virus to COVID-19, but if you know anything about viruses, and I want you to clarify, then you know that it's still the genome is still pretty far, and that makes it very unlikely that any kind of lab experiment could produce something like SARS-CoV-2. So could you clarify that? And then also I want you to address the claim, if you keep this in the back of your head, about WIV, that U.S. funding in the United States were in there nefariously doing this research behind the Chinese government's back. Could you address that after you address the previous comment I made, please?
Sure, I'll be talking for a while, so I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. But
That's okay.
I think one thing whenever I hear someone say that like gain of function research could have created SARS-CoV-2, whenever I hear that, I just immediately think they don't know what they're talking about, and they don't know the limitations of current modern science. Like science is very impressive, but like so for example, RATG13, that previously was the closest virus to SARS-CoV-2, but in September, French and Laotian scientists actually found
Right.
in bats a closer virus to SARS-CoV-2 than RATG13. But So it previously was, but let me just talk about RATG13. RATG13 has a 96% genome match with SARS-CoV-2. So around 96% of it is the same, but the 4% nucleotide difference is because genomes have a lot of nucleotides, and even with the 4% difference, there's over 1,000 nucleotide differences, and it's not just located in specific sections; it's located throughout the entire genome. Like raisins in a pudding might be a good analogy for that. Um, so you can't. So chimeric viruses like it's like when you take parts of a virus and just mix and match sections of a virus, not like changing every individual piece of it. You're just cutting and pasting like entire sections, like cutting paragraphs of an essay, for example. But um, scientists have told me that you would need a virus of at least a 99% genetic match. Um, or some scientists actually say that you might actually need a 99.9% genetic match, and that is not anywhere close to any known virus that we have. So it's because that no known virus, you cannot create SARS-CoV-2 from any known virus because of that fact. Some people are actually saying, like Richard Ebright, he's saying that WIV scientists might have an undisclosed virus. So like yeah, like he has no evidence. He has to further speculate that they have an undisclosed virus that they're not showing anyone, that nobody has ever known before the pandemic, even though Wuhan Institute of Virology scientists are known for collaborating with foreign scientists and sharing their data. Like that's actually the purpose behind one of the main purposes behind it. They're meant to share data. And like why would they hide it before the pandemic? Because before the pandemic, how would you know who would start one? Like so if they had it, they would have shared it. And Dr. Xizeng Li actually has a track record of sharing viruses with other scientists around the world when they publish data on it. But in any case, you need at least a 99% genetic match, if not as high as 99.9%. So whenever someone tells me you can create SARS-CoV-2 with something like RATG13, which has a 96% match and which was previously the closest until last month, they just don't know what they're talking about. That is not that you can't do that. And sorry, I lost what you said to keep in the back of my head. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, no, no. That's all very important. What you raised. So yes, in the back of your head, I asked if you could keep this point that people who are trying to embrace lab leak theory, but try to avoid the inherent xenophobia to it. It's kind of a mental gymnastics, if you will. If you could address this point made that the United States, because the United States had provided funding to the WIV for some of its research, that the United States could have been in the background uh, doing these experiments behind the Chinese government's back, essentially.
Um, I think you mean the reverse because I haven't really heard too many people saying um, the U.S. was doing research behind China's back. The accusation is more that China was doing it behind the U.S.'s back. I think that's what you meant to say. But
Yeah, well, what I meant to say was that there are people, there's some folks who want to avoid the xenophobia, but you can't avoid it, but they want to avoid it. So what they say is that U.S. funding for and U.S. involvement in WIV could very well have led to a lab leak because there might have been activities going on there that the Chinese government was not aware of, and now everybody is trying to cover their tracks. I don't know if you want to just address that from your analysis and your opinion, but I do think that even followers of mine, I've seen it, who've asked me, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And I do think that because lab leak is all about speculation, that's another speculation, but maybe just address these kind of speculations about lab leak theory. Because let's move into the last. We got about 5 or 10 minutes or so. If you could address that, and then address maybe in the broader context of why it's so politically significant to talk about lab leak theory now, and yeah, so yeah, what is the significance of this?
so to answer your questions in reverse order, the significance of this is that apparently there was a poll by Harvard Politico, I believe, in July, stating that around more than half of Americans actually believe lab leak theory now. And there was another poll, I think it was by The Hill, showing that 83% of Americans support taking some kind of action against China if U.S. intelligence agencies claim or provide evidence that the Wuhan Institute of Virology that the virus came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And that's very dangerous because, like, technically, there's really nothing stopping U.S. intelligence agencies from saying stuff that, oh yeah, it came from the lab. The U.S. intelligence review actually concluded that it did not come from a lab, but they of course did the whole hedging thing. Oh, then China's not being transparent, therefore it's possible. But as we just discussed earlier, like, you cannot create SARS-CoV-2 from RATG13 because the genetic distance, even from 96% to 99%, is just too big. But what is it? Uh, so there's a lot of controversy over Anthony Fauci. I think that was a very politicized and
Yes.
public spectacle between Anthony Fauci and Rand Paul. Um, Rand Paul is a very he's not known to be a very honest figure, and he's said some very questionable scientific thing. Uh, I'm not sure if he's a climate denier. I haven't checked on that, but he might be. Um,
Yeah, probably.
I wouldn't be surprised because a lot of the Republican Party is full of climate deniers. But anyways, um, he uh, he in May when they were talking, he asked if like the Institute of Virology was creating super viruses with funding from the U.S., the NIH, and Fauci denied it. And in July 2020, he cited a different 2017 paper saying that basically saying Anthony Fauci was lying and that the NIH was funding gain of function research there. But again, the first thing to know is that even if they were doing it, there's no proof of that. But even if they were, it's not possible to create it anyways. But second, um, the experiments he was talking about, the first one was the 2015 experiment done in North Carolina, not China. So even if that was gain of function, it happened in North Carolina, not China. China, like, they just provided the genetic sequence to Dr. Ralph Barrick. But anyways, that's not gain of function because the viruses didn't become any better at infecting people. The chimeric viruses, and SARS-CoV-2 is not a chimeric virus. And they also use pseudoviruses that can't really replicate as easily, and they can't really start pandemics. So that first confrontation between Fauci and Rand Paul in May 2021 is just irrelevant because it's not a chimeric virus. There was no gain of function there. The NIH found that it was not gain of function, and people like Sam Husseini are misrepresenting that as it is as an exemption, but it's actually was not gain of function. But the second one in July 2021, he cited a 2017 paper um, published by the Wuhan Institute of Virology, I believe, and that was also not gain of function because the viruses were already capable of infecting human cells, and they didn't become any better at doing that. So that's retained function. That's not gain of function. And um, so yeah, like, but it's important to note that like everyone involved in the funding NIH argument is that the NIH, Dr. Xizeng Li, and Dr. Danielle Anderson, and the EcoHealth Alliance, the people directly involved, every single one of them deny that it was gain of function. They explained why it was not gain of function. So, and you don't really need to take their word for it. I explained in the article the science behind it, why it's not gain of function in more detail. So you don't have to believe Anthony Fauci. You could just trust the science and get into that. But the short point of it is, in both instances, Rand Paul is lying and he doesn't know what he's talking about. They're not super viruses. Dr. Xizeng Li was not trying to make viruses more infectious. He was trying to find out how infectious they already were, which is a very huge difference. Um, so I think we could leave it there.
For sure, for sure. Well, let's close out on this then, because the overall narrative of lab leak theory, there are uh, two speculations that are most dominant, right? It's that there was a bioweapon being produced in WIV and it was released out, and this was intentional. That's the farthest right wing argument. The Communist Party of China did this on purpose because they're just super evil and bad, right? And I think most people understand that that's ridiculous. Although, as the polls you cited suggest, there's a huge base of people in the United States and many more in the Western world who likely subscribe to that, and they're probably not going to be won over to our arguments. But then there's this other explanation that I think is honestly equally as racist, in that it suggests that China is so incompetent in its capacity to do this kind of research that there was an accident that happened that China then covered up. So I think if you could close on sort of the xenophobic, anti-China character of lab leak theory, and just talk about, if you could, why it's important to drop this nonsensical and evidence-free conspiracy. We need to drop. We need to focus on other things. But could you talk about the xenophobic element of all of this? So let's just close on that.
So let me answer in reverse order. The first reason why it's important to drop this lab leak theory is that a lot of scientists on the WHO team that went to China, they stated that there's not much time left to find um, the animal where most likely came from,
Mm.
because it's already like a needle in a haystack, even if you started as early as you can. But with things have delaying as much as it has, there's not much time left. And if you the more you delay, and the scientists are claiming that the U.S. backing of the lab leak theory is what's driving China to like not be cooperative with the investigation. Um, I think one could argue that it's not the right thing for China to do, but at the same time, it's a very understandable human reaction not to let hostile powers investigate you with false accusations. So it's understandable, even if not everyone may agree with it. But so that's the first reason why we should drop it. But the racist element is that the idea it's a bioweapon is just so silly, because there are much deadlier viruses than SARS-CoV-2. There's like the Marburg virus, there's Ebola, there's smallpox, and if you wanted to make a virus more infectious, you could insert. There's talk about furin cleavage site in SARS-CoV-2, but there are much more effective furin cleavage sites found in other human coronaviruses. Why would you use RATG13 as the backbone when SARS-CoV-1 is actually deadlier than SARS-CoV-2? It's just a stupid argument. It's just silly. You could just ignore that. But the other argument that the other argument that what is it that scientists accidentally leaked the lab. Um, well, I mean, it's not inherently far fetched, because there have been previous accidents, but like Sam Husseini has documented a lot of them. But there are a few things that we should talk about, because although there have been lab leak incidents before, this is very different from that, because one, the majority of known cases, the earliest known cases of SARS-CoV-2 and excess pneumonia deaths, which are less likely to fudge, happened near the Huanan market in Wuhan, not near the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So just because it happened in Wuhan doesn't mean it started at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. There are other, it could have originated outside Wuhan too. Most scientists I talked to believe that it either started in China or Southeast Asia, but um, they don't really believe that it's likely that it started in the U.S., Brazil, or Spain, or Italy, or France, or anything like that. But they do think that it's possible that it originated outside Wuhan, just because Wuhan's a very urban area, and a pandemic typically requires a large population for a virus to spread, so that could spread more easily instead of like a rural area. But in any case, um, previous lab incidents, the first people who were sick were workers at the lab, not people at a market miles away or near a market miles away. And second, um, a lot of the laboratory releases of infectious viruses happened before we established international standards for BSL 3 and 4 like we have today. And some of the lab incidents that we know about, like what happened in 2004 and 2008, were because scientists, including Chinese ones, were not interested in covering the lab leaks up. They actually informed people. So some scientists have argued that why would Chinese scientists act any differently than before? Because they've revealed lab leaks before. Why would they lie now? And like a lot of the lab leak theory depends on rejecting the credibility of Chinese scientists. They're just accusing them of lying without any evidence. And Dr. Xizeng Li has denied that they had SARS-CoV-2 in their lab, um, and there's no evidence to suggest she's lying. So people basically continuing to insist on this is basically tantamount to accusing them of lying without any evidence, which is just pretty ridiculous. You can't just accuse people of lying just because you don't like them. And um, about transparency, there was actually a study I believe that was released in June of 2021 by Chinese scientists, and they revealed that the Chinese government was lying about illegal wildlife not being sold at the Huanan market. And one thing people should know is that SARS-CoV-2 is a generalist virus. So what that means is that SARS-CoV-2 can infect a lot of other animal species besides just humans. And and SARS-CoV-2 is capable of infecting animal species that were illegally sold at the Huanan market. And the important thing to know is that Chinese scientists released that study. So just because they live in China does not mean that they are unfree to publish information that embarrasses the Chinese government. And that's the lying. There is lying by the Chinese government, but it's actually evidence against the lab leak because it's a lot of samples at the environmental samples at the Huanan market were found to be contaminated with SARS-CoV-2, and that's a lot of evidence for a natural spillover. And a lot of scientists have been talking about that. So, and that's why a lot of the ones who even signed that science letter where like 18 scientists signed this letter, like saying that the lab leak theory should be taken more seriously. Some of the signers of that letter have been one of the most fierce defenders of the natural origin theory. They just wanted, I don't know why they would sign some, I don't know why they would do something so stupid as that, but if they don't even believe it, but they were arguing that it might have originated from the Huanan market or from wildlife farms in China because the wildlife trade is very big. You could debate the ethics of that, but the point is that there's growing evidence that there's a natural origin, and it's just false to say that there isn't. Um, and we could leave it there. There's no proof that they're lying, and Chinese scientists have actually shown independence of the Chinese government. So just because they live in China doesn't mean they're unreliable.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, that's the xenophobic element to this, is that this whole narrative is about, and this whole theory is about sowing mistrust in China. And I think it should come as no surprise that Biden relied on US intelligence to try to verify what had already been a debunked conspiracy theory that started from the far right, from folks like Tom Cotton and Mike Pompeo. So thank you, Josh, for coming on today. Could you just tell people really quickly where people can find your work? I'm gonna stay on with folks after you leave for about 10 more minutes because I have an announcement. But where can people find you, Josh?
So I'm a freelancer that mainly writes for fairness and accuracy in reporting. So you could find my work at fair.org, FAIR.org. I've also written for other outlets like MintPress News. That's where I publish my latest articles that we were discussing today. You could also find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Josh C, as in cat, Josh C0301. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for having me on, Danny.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh. It was great. Take good care.
Okay, see you later.
Bye. All right. That was a great conversation. I hope that it was informative for you all. Don't leave just yet. I'm going on with Slow News Day. We have a question in the chat. When am I going on? I'm going on at 11 a.m. Eastern. So I'm going to stay on with you for 5 or 10 more minutes because I do have an announcement. I want everybody who's on here, first of all, to like the channel, to like this video, subscribe to the channel. And also, just remember, I am going to be doing this on a more full-time basis, both my writing and this work, podcast work, YouTube work. I think I'm going to try to get onto Rockfin. I'm going to have more time to explore some more things, but to make it sustainable, I'm asking those to subscribe to my Patreon at patreon.com/Danny Haiphong. You can always find that in the description, and whatever support you can provide is always appreciated. So again, like this video, make sure it gets boosted so folks can catch up with all the great work that Josh has been doing on this question. Follow him. But I'm going to share an event with you. If you follow me on social media, you've probably already seen this. But I want you to register for an event that I'm speaking at on Saturday, Friends of Socialist China, which I co-edit with two comrades. And I would like for you all to please subscribe to this event. So you can go to the Eventbrite. It's not in the description yet. It's all over my social media, but you can. But I will definitely try to link it at some point. I can actually put this link in the chat if that helps folks. Um, Yeah, I'm going to put this link in the chat. So bear with me. So register for this event. It'll also be streaming on the YouTube channel. We are going to be talking about the propaganda war on China. And this is all about the propaganda war. Lab leak theory is part of the propaganda war on China. The US led propaganda war, which is part of this larger new Cold War against China. And we're going to have some great speakers, as you can see. We have Chen Weihua, who has been known for what people call the Victims of Chen Weihua Foundation, which describe his tweets toward U.S. officials and others responding to their lies, and he has become somewhat of a social media sensation. But he's also an incredible journalist. He's at the EU bureau at the China Daily, and he's been a journalist for quite some time. So he's going to talk about the propaganda war. We have Li Jingjing, who you probably know from her work at CGTN, Daniel Dumbrill on YouTube, myself. We have Ben Norton from the Gray Zone who will be speaking, Jenny Clegg, who's an amazing, incredible anti-war activist, writer, author, academic, Radhika Desai, an amazing professor and scholar, and Kenneth Coyle, Michael Wong, two incredible activists, journalists. So you want to catch this event, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, this Saturday, October 9th. I'll be speaking. I have some remarks prepared. I'm going to be trying to take a new angle, or at least I'm going to be talking about Mr. George Soros in the talk. So you want to be there for that. I know I've talked about that in the past, but I'm trying to keep it original because I know a lot of folks will be talking about things like Hong Kong and Xinjiang, which personally I've talked about a lot in the past. Now I'm kind of sick of it. And I'm also sick of lab leak theory, to be honest with you all. There's some things about this propaganda war, because it never ends, it's endless, it becomes nauseating. And so I try to find other angles to talk about what's really important, which are the roots of this propaganda war, why the US is so hostile towards China, and what is it about China that makes the United States so uncomfortable with the very notion of peace. We could always argue that the United States could never be comfortable with the principle of peace because it is designed to wage endless war. But there is something about China in particular which makes this hybrid war, this new Cold War, so relevant. So please do register for this. 9 a.m. Eastern time. I know it's early. I know it's probably earlier for some of you all out in the Pacific. 6 a.m. It's very early, but try to register. Try to be there. You can stream it. It'll be on the YouTube channel, Friends of Socialist China. And yeah, so I wanted to announce that with you all. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. I did share it in the chat. I will share it again, the Eventbrite. And so just to close, I think that this was a great conversation about lab leak theory. I talked a lot about the politics in the beginning. Josh was very gracious in providing a summary of what he covered in his articles, because he covered a whole lot. And you can read the articles. The links are in the description. Please share them, because I think the subject makes some people hesitant. And please do like this video. Please do subscribe to the channel. Please, this is a topic that has gotten people taken off because of YouTube and because of the censorship. So please do share, like, and hopefully it'll stay on. And that would be great. But again, I am going to go now. Thank you all for coming. I'm on Slow News Day at 11 a.m. So you can come onto that. But I need to take a little bit of a break before then. So subscribe to my Patreon if you can, patreon.com/Danny support helps sustain independent, socialist, anti-imperialist journalism, as always. And I will be with you again very soon, hopefully, as I relaunch Internationalist Transmission. October 12th, we're going to be talking to Abayomi Azikiwe, who is a great journalist and activist, to talk about affairs on the African continent, imperialism on the African continent, with Margaret Kimberley. So look out for information about that. And I'll catch you next time. Peace and solidarity. Take care, everybody.